friends, and welcome to What the Fringe, the podcast dedicated to all things Fringe theater. I'm your host, Lauren Hance. Each week, I visit with a Fringe artist to hear all about their endeavors and gain insight into their process. This week, I'm visiting with Jonathan Paterson of Ribbit Republic. Ribbit Republic is a multi-award-winning independent theater company that has toured and performed for over 25 years in numerous productions and festivals across North America, including over 125 Fringe festivals, Just for Laughs in Montreal, Canoe in Edmonton, the Living Arts Center in Mississauga, the Vancouver Comedy Festival, and Off-Broadway's Soho Playhouse. The company strives to keep challenging themselves and audiences by creating and performing an emergent and bold collection of stories. This year, Jonathan is touring 6 different productions: AWOL, Iago vs. Hamlet, Inescapable, The Fool, Hockey Night at the Puck and Pickle Pub, and How I Met My Mother.
So, I mean, you never really know what's going to, as Rob G says, one of his most famous acts of wisdom was to say to me once, nobody's bulletproof. You know, speaking of old stories, we just finished in Montreal 2005. We just finished winning the Just for Laughs and the Frankie Award for our boy band show and selling out everything. The next day we go to Ottawa. No one showed up. We canceled our first show. It's like no one's bulletproof. You can think, oh, we did so well here. And then the next theater you're canceling. So I keep thinking, oh yeah, that show's going to do well, and then it doesn't, or this show's not going to do well, and it does.
Jonathan Paterson has been working in Canadian theater for over 30 years as a producer, performer, technician, stage manager, and designer. He studied both performance and production at MacEwan University in Edmonton, where he co-founded the independent touring theater company Ribbit Republic. Jonathan founded the French Quarter Hub at the Edmonton Fringe Festival in 2012. It was the first of its kind in Canada, modeling after the hub-based Fringes in Adelaide and Edinburgh. In response to the pandemic, Jonathan created Fringe Livestream, an online platform for live performances, which has been able to return thousands of dollars to independent artists. As a performer, Jonathan has been seen at every major Fringe festival in North America, with over 100 festivals in 30 years under his belt. Jonathan currently lives in Vancouver, where he works at Granville Island Theatre District, Tightrope Theatre, Heart of the City Festival, and Granville Pirates. Jonathan, welcome to What the Fringe!
Yay! Thanks for having me, Lauren.
Absolutely. I am so thrilled to have you. I've been following you on Instagram and online for some time now, and you're like this amazing performer and producer, and you're doing so many really lovely, wonderful things for the community and stuff that I kind of want to do and strive to be. So selfishly, I really wanted you on the program, but I think listeners will have so much to gain from what you have to share. So I reached out and you said, yes.
Yeah, thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, so here we are. Well, let's dive in. You founded Ribbit Republic in college. And so was that kind of what started your Fringe journey, or what drew you to Fringe? How do those two things collide, I suppose?
Well, what drew me to Fringe was I grew up in Winnipeg. And Fringe is obviously a big thing. And for a while there, it was the 3rd largest in the world. Now I think it's maybe number 5. So it's big. So my first Fringe was 1993. So it was several years before I went to college. And, you know, when you're young, you're 19 years old, you want to be a theater artist. You don't know what to do. You hate auditioning. What do? You do the Fringe. So in 1993 was my first Fringe, and we did a Carol Churchill play called Cloud 9, which was way ahead of its time. And I got my first horrible review for my performance, but whatever. And so that's what drew me to Fringe. And it was with Prairie Theatre Exchange School, which was also, you know, very formative for me. Karen Moore was just such a good mentor in my life. And then I got into improv, short form. And then finally in college, did the musical theater program. And one of the sort of the most impactful mentors of my life, Kenneth Brown, who also was one of the forefathers of the Canadian Fringe with Brian Paisley. Brian Paisley started the Edmonton Fringe back in 92, and him and Ken Brown were instrumental in those early years. He was my major mentor in my life. And with Ken and myself, and then several classmates from Edmonton, we started Ribbit Republic, named after a frog that used to appear in our musicals like a little beanbag frog. I look back and I'm like, it's not an easy one to spell, not either one that sticks in your head. And everyone's like, what? Rabbit? What? How do you spell it? Ribbit? And it's like, well, it's stuck now. It's what it is. So yeah.
Well, I like the way you spell it because you've got like ribbit, and there's a big R and a little E. Public. So I didn't find it hard to pronounce, but
it started with Ribbit Productions, and we actually joined forces with Kenneth Brown's company, Theater Public, and then it became Ribbit Republic. And now it just stuck with Ribbit Republic.
Very cool. Well, I love that you like took a chance after your first Fringe with a bad review and you're like, I'm still going to do this. And it's like, everybody's got to go pay those rites of passage.
I've had some hilariously bad and hilariously good reviews over the years. And at first, when you're young, it really sort of affects you. But then after a while, it just doesn't really matter. I get it now. There was last year in Orlando, we got not a very good review from a buddy of mine. And of course, there's just no hard feeling. You see a lot of kids, a lot of young people right now who just get really demoralized by bad reviews. And I can see why. And it kind of sucks. And I have a couple views on that. On one, we're charging people to see us. Like they're paying money to see us. We put ourselves out there and we deserve what review we get, whatever, maybe not deserve it, but at least we're putting ourselves out there for a review. But on the other hand, like some reviewers are mean. And so also got to think of us as artists and our mental health and how we navigate bad reviews too. And sometimes it's just not fair. So it's one of the sort of downfalls of being an artist is having to navigate bad reviews. If we get a bad review, sometimes I'll just pout for a little bit, but whatever.
I think that's normal, right? You process it because it's like you've put your heart out there and somebody just kind of took a dump on it or whatever. It wasn't their thing. And it's like you tell yourself, I'm going to have somebody in my show that loves it. And I'm going to have somebody in the show that doesn't love it. And that happens every time. And today, that person who didn't love it happened to be the reviewer, right?
For sure. Yeah. The star system has got to go because people just look at that. I can't respect reviews that are just slapped with stars on it. So whereas Orlando Sentinel, Orlando Weekly, they don't do stars, they have well-written reviews, Apartment 613 in Ottawa, they're not just slapping stars on there. They're actually
trying to put something out there that helps artists.
Even if they didn't like it, people are reading through the review instead of just looking at the stars.
Yeah, because you want them because they might be interested in what the person said. And I had a review one time. It wasn't terrible, but it wasn't the most glowing. But I remember reading through it and I was like, my show wasn't her cup of tea. That's fine. But oh my gosh, I had so many great pull quotes. You can pull some of those great things out of there and leave the other stuff. So you get creative.
Winnipeg, we got a bad review for AWOL, but they said hilarious. So pull quote, hilarious. There we go.
Exactly. When I go to festivals, I do reviews through the podcast and I don't do a star or anything like that. I just always try to find something nice to say and try to give artists something that they could pull. And even if I'm not a journalist, right? But I'm in the media or whatever. And I do have strong opinions about things, but it's like, I feel like I can find something nice to say about everybody's show and at least give them something. And there have been shows that I've seen that I was like, oi, but I was like, what can I say? Because it's hard. It's so hard already. And and in the States, there's so few people that review anyway. So I was like, let's just throw each other a bone. And I'm not going to pat you on the back and say, wow, that was amazing. But
say something that they could use.
Yeah. The costumes were gorgeous.
The lighting was fantastic. Yeah. It is really sad because Orlando Weekly is one of the last weekly entertainment papers, quote unquote, out there. And Orlando Sentinel is doing a ton of reviews. But other than that, it is just disappearing. The major review, and then what do we do? Blogs are great and we can grab a pull quote from a blog. But unless you're going to get that major support, it's much harder now for us to get our word out. The only way really to get our word out now is online advertising. We have to put several $100s into our advertising. Luckily, it was an easy show to sell. But other than that, you can't just send out your media release.
I'm very impressed with Canadian Fringe artists. I'm very impressed with the system that you all have in Canada. The caliber of people, the caliber of festival, the caliber of event is phenomenal. I had Murray on from Edmonton a couple weeks ago, and he was talking about the economic impact of the Edmonton Fringe and how huge it is. And I'm like, why would you ignore that of something that is bringing a lot of notoriety to Canada? I mean, especially like within the Fringe artists, like if you've got international artists, I tell everybody, there's like getting advice here in the States. They're like, well, what fringes should I do? I'm like, well, anything in Canada. If you can get into any Canadian festival, you're good. I mean, that's always my number one suggestion. Go to Canada.
Canadian fringes have the advantage of being supported by grants. So there is that. But of course, there are a few American fringes that are worth doing. Orlando for sure. I've seen some really, really good shows at the Minnesota Fringe.
Yeah, I loved Minnesota. And everybody's struggling after COVID, right? Like it's really hard. That's just a thing. Like when I went to Capitol Fringe, which is now closed, and there's been a few people in the DC area that have picked it up, and Julianne like worked so hard. DC Theater Arts, she had them come out and review the first weekend. Every single show got reviewed. They were nice, lovely reviews, long reviews. And that was great.
The more we get those, the better it'll be. Like back in the day when major media would support it, it would draw people from outside the Fringe to the Fringe. And that's what it would perpetuate growth. And then, Winnipeg and Edmonton took off, and Toronto took off that way. Now you're getting festivals that are stuck in their own microcosm, and it's hard to get other outside people coming in. One of the guiding principles of providing voices for underrepresented artists is great for many reasons, one of which being it draws patrons from different communities to the Fringe. Vancouver's doing really well on that too. And I think the more that happens, just looking at from a perspective of someone who wants to grow the Fringe, the more you can do that, the better the Fringe will be. That, and every Fringe should have a kids Fringe for the future. Those are the things that are going to try to help grow the Fringe.
Well, let's talk a little bit about Fringe Quarter Hub, which I love. So you started this, which is a thing that's starting to happen in more fringes, and maybe you started it kind of here in North America, of having these BYOV, if you will, or that kind of thing for our lottery-based fringes and giving more artist opportunities. So tell me about it.
Yeah. So it's Offsite Hub. So, BYOV has been going on for, at least as far as I can remember. Someone doesn't get into the Fringe, they'll grab a bar or something. Hubs happen, Perth has major hubs, they have their Pleasure Garden where they program it, but then they have the State Theater, which is another 30 shows in their hub. So 2009, I started in 2012, but I was performing at La Cité Francophone in 2009. So we say that it started in 2009 is a bit ambiguous, but when I rented the other space at French Quarter Hub, La Cité Francophone in Edmonton in the French Quarter, that's when we had 2 venues. So that's when it sort of started to become a hub. I put 8 shows in there, 2012, in a banquet hall in La Cité Francophone, made all the mistakes, didn't know what I was doing. And if there's any techs listening, I threw the dimmer packs underneath the audience chairs, so all they got to do is kick it over and half the lights are out. I didn't know how to operate a friggin' analog board. We didn't even have anything EOS. This is for the techs out there. It was a fat frog lighting console, which I don't even remember what that even looks like. It was horrendous. I don't know what I did for my front lights. I don't know what was going on. And so we made all the mistakes. And I hated it that first year. I'm not doing this again. But then I came back. And then a colleague, dear friend of mine, Sydney Haydock, who lives in Winnipeg, I brought them back. They volunteered that first year just to help me out. And then me and them started it together, kind of. And then we just sort of ran it for years. It got bigger and bigger and bigger, this little off-site hub. And then before we knew it, there was a shuttle bus going from the main Fringe to our hub. And then one year, Dan Cormier shut down the street. And then there's a patio out there that has live bands. And now the hub has grown to 4 venues. So we now have moved across the street in Campus Saint-Jean. and there are 4 venues, 2 theaters, 1 banquet hall we turn into a theater, and 1 classroom that we turn into a theater, which I've named the Sue Paterson Theater after my mom. And there's now 32, one we had to drop out, so now 31 shows in that hub. Last year we sold about 19,000 tickets, which is, more than some Fringes. So I rent the spaces, hire the techs. I got some social media presence for French Quarter Hub. We got an artist liaison and a site manager and a front of house manager, and it's a little hub. It's all great. There's challenges for sure. Like we have to pivot sometimes. There's sometimes emergencies, fires that we have to put out. Artists that aren't necessarily as understanding, which is fine. But it's all worth it. It's all worth it. It's great. And as you said, if you don't get into the lottery, come to me. The price, of course, is not cheap, but Sue Paterson Theater, I keep bringing the price down because when my acting mentor, Ken Brown, said once, it's like the Fringe is becoming harder to take risks, that you can just put a show together. And now you kind of have to do your due diligence and take calculated risks. So the Sue Paterson, I keep bringing the price down, and I want to make the Sue Paterson a venue where you can actually do that, where you can take risks.
That's lovely that you have that forethought to think about that, because, a lot of people ask, especially if they're new to Fringe, what should I do? And I'm like, well, you can do the BYOVs, which yours really isn't. But I was like, it's hard if there's not if you're not known and you do that, it's very difficult. I did BYOV at Minnesota last year, and it was fine. But, you just don't get the same kind of traffic that you do at those hubs. But now you have a whole hub. So it's easier to take a risk there, at that smaller theater, because there's going to be foot traffic. There's going to be people over there. They know it, it feels a little safer.
People know it. I've been told that people come there to see the hit shows, I guess. But there are new shows as well. So they're not all established hits. There are some really good local shows featuring artists who are well known in Edmonton. But then you also get international artists like Chase Pageant comes back a lot. Monster Theatre is celebrating their 25th anniversary, and they're doing 4 shows. And I don't like to say that I jury it. Really, what it is it's kind of a first come, first serve. Like, if you don't get into the lottery, you approach me, there's room, I let you in. Yeah, I don't really want to be like, what about, I don't know about you.
So you're not really curating. It is true Fringe style of come talk to me and we'll see where we can fit you in.
Come talk to me, we'll see where you can fit you in. I mean, Chase Pageant will always have a spot. Mike and Tamisha will always have a spot if they want a spot. For example, right? Monster Theatre will always have a spot. But if you come to me and there's a spot available, I'll let you in. Sometimes, I fill it up, and by February, a good friend of mine is saying, "Oh, I need a spot." And I'm like, "I'm sorry, man, I can't help you out." I fill it up until it's full.
So I was going to say, what makes a good show, at the French Quarter Hub, but it sounds like whoever wants to come can come.
French Quarter Hub is an older crowd, and it's a noon crowd, so they love their matinees at French Quarter Hub. And Grindstone Theatre is more the party, younger person hub, because they have a hub as well. They have several venues in their hub, and that's where the nighttime comes. We do have I have to fit in a bunch of shows throughout the day, so we do have night 10:30 at night as our final, as our late. Well, there's an 11:15 show. And, those are harder ones, but everyone gets their hard show, their easy show, or their nooner show, their primetime show. They all get that. Yeah.
That's good to know too. As I'm looking at Adelaide and talking with some producers down there of what's the audience base? It's something to understand. Like you were saying, Grindstone versus French Quarter Hub, different audience bases. So know your show, what's going to be programmed. Where's a good place for it? Do you feel like you get shows that appeal more to your audience base? Do people know that?
Yeah, I think so. I try to get people, anyone who wants to come, I'll give them a show. So hopefully I want every show to do well. There is a show called Edmund Task, which is kind of like a game show where they do crazy tasks and featuring local talent. And that, I would say, is a not necessarily an older crowd show, and they sell out all the time. There was YEG D&D that used to come to our venue, and they would sell out all the time, and that's a younger crowd as well. So there are some university age shows that come to our venue, and they do really well because A, the cast is 30, and B, they all have grandmas and grandpas. They all do well too. So, I mean, you never really know what's going to, as Rob G says, one of his most famous acts of wisdom was to say to me once, nobody's bulletproof. You know, speaking of old stories, we just finished in Montreal 2005. We just finished winning the Just for Laughs and the Frankie Award for our boy band show, and selling out everything. The next day we go to Ottawa. No one showed up. We canceled our first show. It's like no one's bulletproof. You can think, oh, we did so well here. And then the next theater you're canceling. So I keep thinking, oh yeah, that show's going to do well. And then it doesn't. Or this show's not going to do well. And it does.
That's funny. Well, let's talk a little bit about your very first solo show that you wrote, which is How I Met My Mother. And that you've been doing that for a couple of years. But what led you to want to write this show and do like your own creation?
My mom toured with me years ago and would like produce our Fringe shows and put my college mates up as billets, and was just such a big supporter of my career. And then she got dementia, went through a dementia journey. So there was a point where I actually moved in with my mom and looked after her for a while. And I was a care partner. They call it care partners, but caregiver, I guess, for all intents and purposes. And mom passed away in 2018. And it took me a few years to sort of process the grief of that. And I thought it would be a good story to tell. There's a juxtaposition in that story in that when I was a kid, when I was a teenager, I was a rambunctious, quote unquote, badass. The dichotomy of the two stories of me being a badass teenager and me trying to navigate the waters of caregiving, I thought would make a good show. So I bit the bullet and joined TJ Daw and Megan Phillips' solo creation course in 2021 and just started writing, and the show was born in about 2021. I finished writing it, and then for a Fringe tour in 2022, I went to New York to get directed by Vanessa Quinnell, who directed a lot of Concrete Drop shows with Martin Dockery. And one of the things is I just want a mom. I want a mom to direct my show. And it was perfect to have Vanessa. And she read it and she liked it. And then she directed it, and she was the perfect director. And then I premiered it in 2022 and toured it, and it went really well. People would sort of laugh and cry. The idea is that, you know, you're crying, you're laughing through your tears, or crying or your laughter. And what happens is, you know, there's the two stories that sort of get woven. And I learned a lot of this stuff, or at least get reinforced by a lot of this stuff through TJ Daw and Megan Phillips' solo creation course. And they inspired me to, and then they helped me dramaturge it. And then Ryan Gladstone dramaturged it. And then it just turned into that. And I toured it 2022. Then when I went to Australia for the first time in not 2024, but 2023, I was actually a venue technician. I didn't do a show, but I worked for Art Rage. And I did the show in my cousin's living room, which was just magical because, you know, I talk about my aunt, and of course she was there. And then all the staff and the tech crew from Art Rage and Perth Fringe came to see it. And it was just like amazing. It was just such a wonderful moment. And then this year I'm going to do Gabriola Island. And then the Heart of the City Festival here in Vancouver, where I'm the production manager, but I'm also going to do the show. And then I go to Spruce Grove, the Horizon stage, Spruce Grove in January. And then hopefully I'll just keep doing it more. And, you know, it's close to my heart. And, you know, and I would get people who were, you know, caregivers coming up to me saying, oh, I went through that. And people who have lost their loved ones through dementia who have said, you know, at first I didn't want to see this show because it would be too close, which I totally get. There are things that I can't see, but they would say this was cathartic for me. And this was actually really helpful. I would say at the beginning of the show, I'd say, look, if you need to leave, you can leave. Like, I get it. I completely get it. So, and I even got people who were in their early 20s who lost their grandmother and their grandfather, that was an X factor that I never knew would happen. And it's like people who were moved by that. So yeah, I think ultimately it's cathartic for a lot of people, though I do understand if people are just like, there's no way I can see that, I have a buddy, Kelly Finnegan is my buddy. Probably shouldn't mention him by name because it is a little personal, but he was friends with my mom, right? There are a lot of old fringers who knew my mom, who were like really, really close with my mom, like Rob G, and Kelly to this day would be like, I can't see it. I can't see the show, buddy. Like, I knew your mom. I loved your mom. I lost my mom. I can't see it. And that's totally cool. I get it.
Yep. I get that way about some shows as well. But what a beautiful gift. I mean, that is the power. Like if we want to go full circle back to people not covering the fringe, the beautiful gift of live theater, right? Is that connection that people are having with you on the stage with your story, getting to kind of have these cathartic experiences that you don't get in other art forms, that you do get in live theater. You don't get it as much in film or, television, because there's a separation there, but you're the person on stage. You're right there, living, breathing human being.
Yeah. Like storytelling, like more than theater, but storytelling. You're telling your own story. You're talking to the audience. You're letting the audience in, like I don't pretend. I learned this from Ryan Gladstone in Monster Theater. I don't pretend I'm not doing theater. Like if something happens, something happens. Like I'd be in the middle of How I Met My Mother and a fly would would fly by and I'd grab it. Like that's the beauty of it. You're in the moment. Certain times, of course, of the show where you don't want to ruin that moment. Sure, I get that. But there are some moments in Vancouver once a volunteer was talking too loud outside and I just went, 1 sec, everybody. And I just left and I talked. I don't find that subversive or like rocking the boat. I just find that normal. A lot of people find that normal, but some people would be like, what? What's happening?
Well, if it's goes with the show. Okay. Well, speaking of fun little interactions like that, we're getting here close to the end. So I will ask my funny little question, which is, what is your most interesting or awkward fringe interaction? I'm sure you have a bunch, so you can pick one or two if you like.
One thing that came to mind, and this is like almost inspirational. It was 2002 and we were young and just, touring in a van. And we were doing a show called Be a Man, which was all about what people perceive men to be. And we were like trying to turn that on its head, right? And it did really well when we did it in Edmonton. And we were doing it in Montreal. And we had a show where about 2 people showed up. And we were in the beer tent after the Montreal Fringe, and we were all just like down on ourselves. And I was thinking, this is just, why are we doing this? And someone from the Centaur Theater was sitting with us, and they turned to me and they said, look, and this is very simple, but for some reason it moved me. It said, look, 2 people came to see your show, but think of it this way. 2 people were moved enough to come see your show. And I thought about that. I was like, that is so true, And then we got runner up for the Just for Laughs award or something like that. But so it was a good show. But in that moment, we were so down on ourselves when someone just said, look, they were moved. And it's like, okay, that's why we do it. I mean, if 2 people are moved, that's why we do it. So that's one interaction that was 23 years ago.
That's a beautiful piece of advice, though, to remind us, right? Somebody came, they paid, they wanted to see it. They wanted to be there with you.
Nobody knows this, so I'm going to announce this on this podcast. One of my favorite moments of Fringe is I met my brand new fiance at the Orlando Fringe, and we are going to get married. And I haven't announced this to anybody. I just told a few people, and now this is coming out in this podcast. And we're in love. We're both fringers, and we're going to get married.
That is so exciting. Oh, I'm so honored. Oh,
this is like another amazing moment of Fringe is that I met the love of my life at Fringe.
Oh my goodness. Oh, well, congratulations. That's so exciting. Maybe by the time this comes out, the cat will be out.
Look, I'm glowing.
I know you are. You're glowing, crying. I hope you guys have a wonderful fringy wedding.
Yeah, it's going to be great.
On the stage and Well, I'll give it 5-star reviews. And
Yeah, please do. Yeah, the wedding. Well, Chase Padgett got married as a Fringe show.
Oh my gosh. At a Fringe show?
It was a Fringe. I didn't make it, but it was like a Fringe event. Yeah.
I'm like here for that. I am so here for all of that.
I'm so here for all of it. The flashlight cabarets and I even wrote a song about Fringe where to the tune of Stan Rogers' "The Idiot," which is an obscure song, but it was all about Fringe touring. And then I remember singing it at the Vancouver Flashlight Cabaret, and it was like moving and everything, and just like, it's my career. Like, it's like I've made a living at it.
Like, could you surprise everybody? Surprise wedding at the Cabaret of Bullshit? Is that what it is in Vancouver with the flashlights?
Cabaret Bullshit. Maybe I should. Oh, that's a good idea.
They're like, what are all these people doing here that we're not at the Fringe? Who are they?
What is my family's here?
That's so great. Well, thank you for sharing all of that and just talking all things Fringe, and congratulations. I'm so excited for you. And thank you for being on the program today.
Yeah, thank you.
Absolutely. Well, Jonathan will be performing Iago versus Hamlet at the Edmonton Fringe, and then also Hockey Night at the Puck and Pickle Pub. I love saying that, at the Edmonton and Vancouver Fringe. And of course, he'll be running the French Quarter Hub there in Edmonton. And How I Met My Mother will be performing in a slew of different places. You can check his website for all of that information, so you can learn more about Jonathan and his work online at ribbitrepublic.com. And you can keep up with John on Instagram and Facebook and Bluesky at Ribbit Republic. What the Fringe is produced and hosted by me, Lauren Hantz. This episode was edited by Ben Ellis of Renowned Media. And those sweet tunes you hear are provided by Paul Snyder of Orchestra of Sound. And our logo was designed by Ruby Arnold of Ruby Makes Things. What the Fringe can be found on your favorite podcast platforms and now on YouTube. Be sure to hit that subscribe button so you can stay in the know when new episodes release. And keep up with What the Fringe on Instagram at whatthefringe_productions, and find us online at whatthefringeproductions.com. I really can't think of any better way to end your interview with What the Fringe than...
One of my favorite moments of Fringe is I met my brand new fiance at the Orlando Fringe, and we are going to get married.